Our Earth is overpopulated and virtually devoid of natural resources in 2048. The government launches a program to genetically alter 14 soldiers so they can travel to Titan, a moon of Saturn, and establish a new civilization there. These 14 volunteers and their families are relocated to their own neighborhood and given opulent, cutting-edge homes. One of these volunteers is the former pilot Rick, who is joined by his doctor wife Abigail and their little son Lucas. Because Rick was shot down while in the Air Force and had to trek the Syrian desert hurt and by himself for 3 days without food or water, proving he is a tough survivor, the program's director, Dr. Collingwood, has high hopes for Rick's rehabilitation. While Abigail acknowledges to Collingwood that she is a little concerned that Rick will become seriously ill. Both Rick and Abigail are doing this for their boy because they want him to have a future. Collingwood acknowledges that this might occur, but assures her not to worry as all Rick will want is the appropriate aftercare. They meet for the first time with Collingwood to begin the treatment after all of the volunteers have completed packing and moving. First, he gives a presentation on the project, outlining how humans devastated the planet and why Titan is the only other location in our solar system that still has an atmosphere and primitive ecosystem. Yet, it also has liquid methane falling into enormous oceans and lakes that they are unable to swim in, as well as a nitrogen-rich atmosphere that they are unable to breathe since it is simply too cold to survive there. For this reason, they've chosen to genetically modify humans to help them blend in with Titan's native features rather than terraforming the planet. While Collingwood explains the clinical studies were successful, he also acknowledges there's no assurance everyone would live. One of the volunteers questions how the bodies won't reject the medicine. Rick advises the volunteer to go if he doesn't like the program and silences him when he starts to question the program again. The volunteers are from all across the world and were all picked because they all overcame difficult situations. Following the briefing, they are given card keys for complete base access and taken to the lab for their first of 300 shots that they would receive over the following few weeks. Rick only comprehends about half of what Dr. Freya says when she explains the purpose of each shot. From that point on, Rick's family adopts a new schedule, but it is nothing out of the norm. Abigail takes care of the house while Lucas attends school. And when she is permitted, she waits with Rick while he receives various therapies. Due to their close proximity to one another, the volunteers quickly become great friends and begin to hang out outside the base. They frequently host dinner parties and barbecues. Sometimes the conversations at these gatherings become a little spooky, like when one of the volunteers confesses that he fears they won't be permitted to return after the 2 years they committed to spend on Titan. One day, as this is the last day the volunteers are permitted to drink, there is extra drinking at their BBQ celebration. Rick helps Abigail ascend the stairs in the evening because she is feeling queasy from her excessive drinking. But he ends up falling because he starts to cough a lot and feels like he can't breathe. When Abigail checks on him, she sees that he has a fever and pulls him to the bedroom where she gives him medicine, tucks him in, and stays with him the remainder of the night. Once the volunteers' DNA samples have advanced to Collingwood's satisfaction, which has taken some time, it's time for a significant test. Without an oxygen tank, the group is instructed to spend a lengthy period of time submerged. After 30 minutes, only Rick and Tally remain, creating a small competition. Tally eventually reaches 39 minutes, but Rick stays there and even starts swimming in the pool since he is so at ease. This surprises everyone since Rick isn't swimming normally. Instead, he's moving quickly like a dolphin. Rick practices this new maneuver in the garden pool with his son in the evening. Following that, he tucks Lucas in. And to his astonishment, the child mentions his late grandfather, who he is certain would have enjoyed all of this. So he goes to the pool with his wife to have some fun in the water. But Abigail stops him when she sees some dark veins on his body. Rick wonders what's wrong, but the darkness suddenly disappears. So Abigail chooses to put it out of her mind for the time being. The volunteers undergo their first procedure a few days later. When one of the spouses, Rayanne, comes to see Abigail so that their children can play together, she expresses some of her concerns. She admits she's terrified and feels that her husband shouldn't be here. Abigail reassures her that the volunteers will preserve humanity, and most importantly, their children. Rick recovers from the procedure with no complications and goes home to continue spending time with his family. Although Abigail is relieved to see him doing well, she is also concerned about the potential negative effects she read about in the instruction booklet they were given. Later on in the evening, Abigail awakens to see the bed vacant. Rick is found in the kitchen applying ice to his skin because he is feeling really heated. Rick dares Abigail to a quick game as she gets ready for him with a larger bucket of chilly water. Both of them place their hands inside the bucket, but Rick leaves them there, indicating he can no longer feel the cold, while Abigail has to remove hers after a short while since she can't tolerate it. The following morning, they go for a run together and pause to enjoy a wonderful location beside the road that offers the best panorama of the surrounding area. Rick regrets his inability to save the environment. The many studies, which also involve swimming for extended periods of time in icy water and sprinting while wearing masks that imitate Titan's atmosphere, continue. Tally is one of those volunteers who sometimes can't take it and has to quit for the day because she is obstinate and refuses to leave the water despite barely being able to stand the cold. Rick shows her how to meditate underwater in order to assist her. The volunteers are taking showers one day after the testing is finished when Rick notices he's losing hair. Tally confirms that it has also happened to her. They discover one of the women is suffering a seizure and vomiting blood when they suddenly hear screaming. The physicians race to save her, but they are powerless to do so, and the volunteers experience their first loss. The volunteers meet later that day to talk about what transpired. Although the others reassure them that they always knew there was a risk, some of them are also concerned about passing away. Even knowing they shouldn't, they choose to drink in order to cope. Tally's husband Andrew assists Abigail in the kitchen as Rayanne consoles her husband Zane outdoors. Tally joins them to point out that Andrew is now keen to create a family after he tells the story of how they first met and how he struggled to be with her until the very end. Tally admits that Andrew expects she'll leave for 2 years to get it out of her system and become a decent wife, but she wants more than that when he goes to place the plates on the table. Later, while eating dinner, Abigail notes that all of the volunteers occasionally have black veins. Screaming suddenly emanates from the garden. Rayanne is being attacked by Zane, who is having a breakdown. The other guys run outside and restrain Zane till he calms down while Rayanne is taken away by Abigail. The volunteers receive further medication from Freya the following day, which will prevent them from experiencing the same issues as the deceased woman and Zane did. When Abigail seeks to speak with Collingwood because she thinks some of those doses are excessively high, he isn't available. Later on in the evening, Rick discovers that he is vomiting blood. Rick is instructed to take a break while Abigail cleans, and when he isn't looking, she draws a sample of his blood. She eventually discovers there are cameras installed throughout the house so that the folks running the program can keep an eye on them round the clock as she travels around the house to lock all the doors afterward. Rick starts to notice that his skin is peeling off the next time he uses the pool, but he doesn't seem too concerned. When they retire to bed, Abigail discovers Rick's skin condition and the fact that he is balding, which makes her worry even more. The following day, Abigail uses a microscope to examine Rick's blood and notices that it is becoming black. The participants then undergo the next major surgery, which entails transforming their eyes into those of a cat so they can see in the dark. Rick's surgery goes smoothly, but he must wear bandages over his eyes for a while, and his family must assist him around the house. Abigail overhears Rick writhing in pain one night as his eyes start to hemorrhage. Abigail approaches Collingwood to inquire about the situation as they take him to the lab for a second surgery, pointing out that something is alive inside of Rick and that she is aware of the cameras. Collingwood reveals that although he didn't want the cameras, the Pentagon had ordered them for security reasons. Collingwood's blindness is only a necessary part of the process, and he will be okay in a few days, he says. Abigail believes he is keeping something from her, but Collingwood sends her home. As Abigail hears some sirens unexpectedly, she hurries to her house and starts preparing some things for Rick. When she emerges, she sees the troops encircling Zane's house. Although she isn't permitted to get any closer, she nevertheless witnesses the horrifying scene that follows. A mutant Zane pushes Rayanne out the window, killing her instantly. Zane was also killed when the soldiers broke into the home and opened fire on him. Later at the base, Abigail is keeping an eye on Rick and hears the arrival of more soldiers. Abigail seizes the opportunity to take Rick's car key and conduct a snooping mission while Collingwood is occupied handling this situation. She enters Collingwood's office after strategically concealing to evade security and discovers all the documents proving that the volunteers' DNA is being mixed with animal DNA to achieve the next evolutionary stage, which Collingwood has named Homo titanians. In the meanwhile, Collingwood is meeting with NASA representatives and Colonel Solano to discuss ending the program because it is based on unproven science. The last group to attempt something similar were the Nazis, but now the volunteers are turning violent and the situation is turning criminal rather than being about space. Colonel Solano requests that this experiment be removed from his base, but Collingwood and his advisor point out that the ministers of defense have the final say, and that they will not depart until they order them to do so. Freya tries to tell Collingwood that they should stop after the meeting, but he ignores her. Collingwood shows up after Rick is gone home to tell that his sight will return in 24 hours. Zane's mind was merely overloaded since they had underestimated the brain's capacity to comprehend the heightened sensations. But a new procedure could correct this. As Abigail eventually loses it and demands to hear the truth, Collingwood finally acknowledges that they are giving the volunteers animal DNA. He acknowledges Abigail's concern because he cannot promise that it would succeed, but also argues that they have always understood there would be dangers. Abigail dislikes knowing that Rick must undergo this new operation in order to survive and withdraws for a while. A day later, Rick takes off the bandages to check his vision and shaves his head to prevent bald spots. He is so amazed when night falls and he realizes he can see every detail in the dark that he contacts Collingwood to confirm he will perform the treatment. All of the volunteers undergo surgery while the families remain at home, but there are numerous complications, and the majority of them pass away. Only Rick and Tally are ultimately still alive and in good health. When Andrew, Abigail, and Lucas visit Rick and Tally the following day, they are astonished to learn that they have evolved into strange, mutant beings that can only communicate by touch and a low-frequency sound that humans cannot hear. Abigail starts to cry when Rick presses his palm against the glass separating them, and her sobs only deepen when Collingwood hands Abigail Rick's wedding ring. Tally and Rick are permitted to remain at home until they depart for Titan in a few days. When Abigail tries to assist Rick in donning human clothing, Rick accidentally slaps her. He tries to check on her, but Abigail is now so terrified of him that she is unable to resist avoiding his contact. Rick prefers to be in the pool than the house because he feels more at ease there. After tucking Lucas into bed one night, Abigail goes outside and sees Tally walking into the garden with her hand covered in blood. Rick approaches Tally so they can talk through these strange tentacles that extend from their fingertips without seeming bothered by it. As the army finally enters the neighborhood, they discover Andrew dead in the shower. Abigail runs upstairs to hide with Lucas as they start to approach her home. Tally is hit repeatedly by tranquilizer darts fired by the troops before she is finally brought to the ground. Tally, however, reveals she is awake and uses the tentacles to murder one of them as they get closer. The others retaliate right away by starting to shoot her. The soldiers then try to pursue Rick, but with his new strength, he effortlessly knocks them out. Abigail hears the noise and emerges to stop Rick as he attempts to drown the final soldier in the pool. However, it's too late, and Rick flees after realizing what he's done. Colonel Solano ignores Collingwood's request for him to refrain from killing Rick since he is an expensive research subject and orders his entire crew to start seeking for him. For their own safety, Abigail and Lucas are brought to the base, but when Abigail finds out where Rick went, she departs. Abigail rushes to their secret location and discovers Rick there after making sure she isn't being followed. When Rick's tentacles have her wrist in their grasp, Abigail kisses him to show that she is no longer afraid. The army helicopters locate them at that precise moment and take them out. Later, at the base, Abigail awakens and tells Collingwood they had to torture her for her own good. After Tally demonstrated that the Earth's environment will either drive these new bodies insane or just kill them, the Pentagon must transfer Rick to Titan as soon as possible because the program is about to be terminated. Abigail must persuade Rick to go because they can't make him go because doing so could kill him as well. She is then brought to see Rick, who is housed in a glass cage. Collingwood requests that Abigail inject Rick with quetiapine, a drug that acts as a chemical lobotomy and obliterates all of his memories. Although Collingwood says it's the only way to get him to leave, Abigail doesn't like it. Abigail drops the quetiapine injection for the soldier to pick it up, who then administers it to her from a drawer. After giving Rick a long, thoughtful glance, Abigail then makes her way into the cage and administers the shot that puts him to sleep. When Abigail emerges, she invites Freya to accompany her as a soldier goes up to Rick to make him ready for the journey. Collingwood discovers Abigail took saline from the drawer while the soldier wasn't looking and gave it to Rick, even though Rick is simply acting asleep and kills the man. The soldiers start firing, but Rick simply flees and hides in dimly lit spaces where he has the advantage of sight. Freya directs them to a different exit, where they rejoin with a badly injured Rick, as Abigail proceeds to pick up Lucas. Freya searches for some medicine as Lucas and Abigail give him a hug to demonstrate once more that they are not afraid. Then, all the troops arrive. Abigail rejects Collingwood's request to go because he fears the troops would shoot them all. Angry, Collingwood orders the soldiers to fire, but Solano keeps his own and refuses to slaughter 2 unarmed women and an innocent child. He then turns and points his own weapon at Collingwood, and the other soldiers do the same. Abigail rushes to Rick's side as Collingwood is taken into custody, and her embrace enables him to reaffirm his most cherished memories. Later, Abigail and Freya work as researchers on the Titan II project, employing more moral techniques to preserve the world. In Titan, where he displays his new body has wings and can fly around his new home, Rick is being dispatched in the meanwhile.